I have been looking forward to our next conversation with Colorado Commissioner Susana Cordova. Commissioner Cordova has partnered with state leaders to advance major education initiatives focused on improving student outcomes, addressing chronic absenteeism, and increasing post-secondary readiness. She works closely with partners to explore updates on Colorado's assessment and accountability systems, and that's informed recent legislation that we're going to get into. So, Commissioner, I know this is just a few of your key priorities, but I want to applaud you for your success in moving this legislation into action, but beginning the hard work of implementation, and we're going to do a little chat about that. So please join me in welcoming Commissioner Cordova. All right. Because seeing is important up here. So, all right. So, Commissioner, let's just start out by talking about some of the key things that you did to set the stage for the work that you wanted to do in Colorado. You worked with other state leaders, and it was rooted in high-quality data on student achievement at the core.
Yeah, I feel like we're really fortunate here in Colorado. We have an incredibly education-focused governor. Governor Jared Polis came in with lots of personal experience in education as a school founder and a real passion for using education as a platform to ensure that all kids get off on the right foot, but then really focused it all the way through to the workforce. So that's been incredibly beneficial. As I joined the department as commissioner, we had just started our universal preschool program. I have a colleague, Dr. Lisa Roy, who leads the work in early childhood in our state. And we have an incredibly close relationship with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, because we recognize it really is cradle to career. And so all of that data, making sure that we have access early, I like to say, we want to start strong, stay engaged, and leave ready for all kids in K-12.
Yeah, so one of the things that you did, the Colorado Department of Education, under your leadership, and the state board identified student engagement, academic outcomes, post-secondary and workforce readiness, and teacher workforce as key priorities in your new strategic plan, or your updated one. And you talked about wildly important goals. You actually wrote that in the plan, which I loved. So what are some of the evidence-based approaches that you're using to address each one of those?
Sure. So as you just mentioned, we've got three really district-focused, wildly important goals. The first one is increasing student engagement. We knew that was critically important. Kids just can't learn if they're not in school. And during the pandemic, we hit a terrible high of 35% of our kids chronically absent. Colorado also has the largest number of schools using a 4-day school week. And so if you miss 10% of 145 days, you are missing far too much school. So we knew the first thing we had to do was really focus on getting kids back into school. We have an attendance campaign, lots of different supports. We've really made it a focus of our Bright Spots work, where we seek out the districts that are getting great achievement with getting kids back into school and profiling them, sharing their best practices around the state. So that was one of the things. The second area is accelerating student outcomes. Obviously, as the Department of Education, the most important thing we can do is make sure that kids are learning and are on track. And that's a third grade reading goal and a post-secondary workforce readiness goal. Colorado is one of the states that our state scores and our NAEP scores track really well. That's the good news. The bad news is we still have fewer than 50% of our kids at meeting expectations. And so we know that's an area where we really need to continue to focus for our third graders because of how important that is to get them ready for that post-secondary workforce readiness. And then finally, the third area is the work that we do around strengthening the educator workforce. Like, you can't get engaged kids, you can't get the outcomes if you don't have teachers. And one of the things that we're really proud about, the data that we're able to use, is real live data. In fact, I think we have a slide that I'm going to share that shows real-time data for where we have teacher shortages and how we're addressing those teacher shortages. This is a live website on our department website, where you can actually see what are the shortage mechanisms, where that's a map of Colorado you can see. The darker the color, the deeper the need in terms of recruitment of teachers, and it looks at it over time. That's helped us actually think about goals in a different way. So it really helped us think through, in some of the areas, particularly in rural Colorado, you're not going to be able to recruit people to these places. Sometimes housing is challenging, sometimes salary is challenging. And so rather than thinking about what's the recruitment effort, we really determined we need to grow your own strategy. And sometimes that's working with people who are already employed in the district, it's working with students, but it really is trying to say, if housing is the barrier, we need to talk with the people who are living here right in our own community to be able to do that.
Yeah, so let's talk about a couple of these and dig in just a little more. You talked about the post-secondary workforce readiness, third grade reading, and then there's a post-secondary measurement. And obviously there's a lot in between there. So those might be the state goals, but like, what are some of the things that you're doing to help districts along the way around measurement of meeting those goals?
Right. You know, I think the thing that's really great about having such a laser-like focus on third grade is getting that strong foundation actually pays off in 4th, 5th, 6th grade. And in fact, we just had, Colorado has a program called the READ Act, which looks at what are high quality instructional materials, what is the training in scientifically based reading research that teachers need, how do you make sure that their school leaders are trained in those similar approaches. And we're just now getting to the point where we've got 4th, 5th, 6th graders who had teachers all the way from kinder through 3rd grade. And what we're seeing is our students in 5th grade this year have benefited from the work that their teachers in those early years put in. And so our 3rd grade scores are not yet accelerating at the pace that we want, but when we compare this year's 5th graders to when they were in 3rd grade, we're seeing really big jumps, in fact, 8 points higher than when they were in 3rd grade. So we know those strong foundations pay off over time.
Well, I think that's the important point, is like building the foundation, because, you know, we're in a room full of people who do assessment and accountability. And the goal of having that assessment is not just to get the same results year after year. You've got to have the inputs that come along with that.
Weighing the pig doesn't make the pig fatter. That's right. Right?
That's a quote. I think that'll be on Twitter later. So let's talk a little bit about the attendance piece too. And I'm going to come back to the teacher stuff. This is also an important point. Like, knowing that kids are missing school is one thing, but like what you do to get kids in school, and you talked about the 4-day week in Colorado too. Can you talk a little more about the state's efforts around that?
Sure. So for sure, I think it's really important, particularly, you know, Colorado is an incredibly diverse state. We have 178 districts, and 95 of our 178 have 500 or fewer students. And so the vast majority of our kids are sort of in the big Front Range districts, but the vast majority of our districts are small or small and rural. And so it's really important that we think differently about the approaches and the strategies. Really thinking about local context makes a big difference. So, you know, in the Denver Public Schools, they've kicked off this great campaign using Infinite Campus. Parents get messages on a monthly basis. It lets them know how many days their students have missed, if they're chronically absent, like big system kind of approaches that make a lot of sense in a big district. In a small district, Fort Morgan, which is in northeastern Colorado, also really focused on chronic absenteeism. They're an incredibly diverse district, sort of like the plains almost toward Nebraska.
I was going to say it's only about an hour and a half from where I grew up in Nebraska. So,
yes, very close to Nebraska. There's a meat packing plant, a sugar beet factory, and they have 35 different languages spoken. So it really presses on our thinking, I think, about what we think rural districts in Colorado might look like. And in Fort Morgan, what they decided was that they needed to have a pre-intervention before attendance court. And so they worked with their community, and they put together a group of community leaders representing healthcare, the city, the school district, mental health providers, to really kind of figure out what is the barrier to getting kids to school. When it's transportation, what's the transportation solution? When it's mental health, what are the supports that are necessary around that? If it's childcare and older kids are staying home, how do we have the right supports for families to ensure that kids can get to school? And so I think it really is, one of the things that we've learned is, it is really important to have the broad messaging And we do that, I think, exceptionally well. We've got lots of open and free collateral and resources on our website. And you really do have to tackle the root cause. And typically it is not because people think school is unimportant. Typically it's that there are these other challenges that are getting in the way, and we've got to be able to focus on that.
You do an incredible job of having open two-way communication with your districts as well. Having been the superintendent in Denver, you know what it's like to be on the receiving end of the state, but at the same time, you have, is it weekly calls with your superintendents? You get information back and forth. Can you talk a little bit about your communication with them?
Sure. So I feel like this is like one of the silver linings of COVID, frankly. Like, I think COVID really helped us learn how to open up communication models using virtual meetings, using frequent updates. So during the school year, we, particularly after so many changes started rolling out in the January-February timeline, we do a Monday and Thursday update. Because I was a superintendent, my commitment is to try to make it less than 2 phone swipes long, because superintendents really don't have the time to read big, long, lengthy emails. And so they were very factual, very to the point, very timely with access to resources about the news that was coming out. So now that it's summertime, we do that once a week on Mondays. So twice a week during the school year, once a week now that it's summertime. And then we host a monthly call by the department for superintendents where we go over updates. And then we participate in a weekly call that an organization called the Rural Alliance hosts for rural districts. And so it's really just been a fabulous way to both share information, but to hear what's top of mind for people and make sure that the work that we're doing doesn't just work in PowerPoint, but works in the real world.
So let's get back to the talking about the real-time data. And if we can show the slide again, like teacher shortage, like notwithstanding, if we don't have a teacher in the classroom, the measurement is probably not going to be there. But what do you do to help manage that? And if you're looking, I'm looking at the stuff that's clear over on the right. I can't read that far.
That's okay, yeah. And so really, and just a huge shout out to our educator talent team that puts together these live databases. It really gives us the ability to kind of like drill down and figure out where are the places that are struggling the most, and how is it that we can help push our resources into those areas. We have regional teacher recruitment individuals. In fact, one of my own personal friends had been a teacher in Colorado many years ago, and now after a career change wants to become a teacher again. He was able to reach out to one of our career navigators, a regional specialist, who was able to walk him through what do you need to do to renew your license, what kind of coursework do you need to have? How do you go through the application process? And after not a terribly long period of time, he had been keeping up with some of the education work, even though he hadn't been teaching. In maybe a 6 weeks time frame, he was able to renew his Colorado teaching license. And that really is the kind of service that we need to be able to offer, to know where the need is, to be responsive to the people who are interested in doing this work, and making sure that we can do the kind of matchmaking that is so important for classrooms to have qualified teachers.
So let's talk about challenges about real-time data, about how to measure progress towards your goals, because you've got some wildly important goals, right? And there are some key things that can be measurement, but what are some of the challenges that you've found in being able to access real-time data?
Yeah, Colorado is a very local control state, and so we don't have a statewide student information system. We don't get real-time data for the most part in the majority of, particularly in terms of information about what's happening in school districts. So we don't have live attendance data, we don't have live achievement data. And so it is really important that we think about how do we collect information from districts in a way that is most beneficial in terms of the information we have, but poses the least burden in terms of the work to input it into our data pipeline. And that's a tricky balance. We also are working really hard on statewide longitudinal data systems because of the importance of being able to map early childhood to K-12, K-12 to higher ed, K-12 to the workforce, like all of those places are areas where we can have leaky pipelines, and really a major area of focus. And again, just kudos to Governor Polis. He really understands the importance of making these connections, and has really directed all of his teams to work in collaboration in this.
He's created a couple of task forces to work on that kind of work. You've been a big participant
Sure.
in that and added folks to those. Can you talk a little bit about that work and how are you bringing people along? Particularly, let's take higher ed, for example, that connection, and how you might make those work.
Yeah, it is really important, and it's super fast. This is my second. I'm just wrapping up my second year as the commissioner here.
It seems like
I know,
a lot longer.
it seems like it's been the days are long and the years are short,
we've known
right?
each other for a long time. Yeah.
And it is really, every state is really, really different, and where things are housed is really different in every state, and every structure is really different. But one of the things I think our governor really understands is the importance of leadership to work in collaboration with each other. And so in addition to some of our ongoing task forces, I'm a member of the statewide longitudinal data system governing board, and we have representatives from higher ed, from workforce, from industry who participate in that. That's really, really important. The governor actually just released an executive order around how the work will move forward on an ongoing basis in terms of the kind of collaboration that's really important for that to be successful. And then we also just recently in this legislative session had a task force that was put together. It was an 18-month-long task force out of the 23 session that looked at our assessments and our accountability system. And I think that was a really great example of the Colorado approach, which was you needed to get all parties to the table. And so that meant K-12, representatives from the field. It meant people with the Ed Reformer label, people with the teacher union label, big cities, small districts, like everybody needed to be at the table. Traditional districts, chartered school representatives to talk about what works in our system and what doesn't, and how is it that we can craft a vision for the future that gives us the kind of information that we think is important and is more than just test scores.
So you mentioned the READ Act, which was requiring school districts to ensure all K through 3 teachers and 4 through 12 reading interventionists have completed evidence-based training in teaching reading. And I'm just going to read this goal so that it would be on the Colorado State Assessment, moving from 42% in 2024 to having 60% of your students proficient in 2028. And you talked a little bit about how you're making progress on that. Is there, and some of this probably was a part of ESSER funding that was able to be used for some of the teacher training. Is there a goal to get more teachers trained, and also moving into higher ed so that those teachers can be trained? Is there more to that?
Yeah. I think we're really fortunate in Colorado. Colorado, before I came to the department, had already put into place new review processes for higher education. And so our higher ed programs, one of the things we really dig deeply into is what's their training in reading for our elementary educators. And that really makes a big difference. Colorado has actually been nationally recognized for the work that we do around the reviews of higher education, because it's so important for people to walk through the door with at least the beginning of that foundation in what it means to teach reading using scientifically based reading research. So that's one of the things that we're really proud of. And then the READ Act has within it the requirement that every teacher from kinder through 3rd grade completes training in the science of reading. And it is so serious that every year in the spring, we actually have to present to our state board the lists of teachers who have not completed that and the reason for why they have not completed that, by district, by name, and with the reason. And so it might be, this person was on maternity leave, or they had whatever it is, but you literally, it is a requirement that everybody completes that.
And how many years have you been doing?
This last year was the first full year of implementation of all components. And so I think at this point, I was out of Colorado for a portion of this time. I think it went into effect in the 19 session. because the first year of the training requirement was the fun COVID year. And so it definitely put a little bit of a dent into the swiftness of the rollout. But we really are at the point now where all districts are required to use scientifically based reading, highly qualified materials, to have trained teachers, to have trained school leaders. And what we do find, particularly when districts participate in our early literacy grants, that these are places that are getting outsized results. And something that's just important to know about Colorado is our READ Act is really a reading assessment. The assessments that we use are strictly looking at students' reading. Our state tests look at both reading and writing. And so the state test is a harder test. But what we find is that when districts participate in the early literacy grant, not only do they improve their reading scores, they improve their reading and writing scores and have larger numbers of students meeting expectations on our state test.
I'm thinking back to a day when I was in Idaho and we rolled out the online testing, and we did it optionally that first year, and then the board required that we report out which districts didn't do that. The next year, that list was much smaller. After it became a public list. So I'm assuming that will be the same for you all.
Sunshine cures a lot of ails. Yes, that's true.
Yes. So let's talk about some post-secondary and workforce readiness measures that you guys are working on. You have included non-degree credentials, post-secondary credit accumulation, and work-based learning. I'd love for you just to unpack some of those measurements. You're in a room full of people about measurement. How are you guys thinking about those?
Yeah. Our wildly important goal around this is that 100% of our high school graduates will have completed either 12 credits that can apply to a degree, an industry-recognized credential, or a meaningful work-based learning experience that can lead to meaningful work. And we believe that's true, that all students can attain one of those three things. We call them the big three. And we think it's really important that we're talking about that. We have, I think, have a very good policy context for this. Our state has invested funding in access to dual enrollment credits. We've done a lot of work on transferability of credits so that if you're taking courses from our community colleges, that they are guaranteed transfer in those courses that apply to four-year degrees. We've worked very hard with our local regional business associations to make sure that when we're talking about meaningful work-based experiences, their experiences that really lead to jobs that people need. I always think back to my time when I was in the Denver Public Schools. This was a big focus for us. And for a while, the most popular work-based class was around digital design. And that can be really appealing to kids. But there were literally no jobs in that area. And so we really had to do some soul searching around how do you have opportunities for kids who are passionate about something, but really how do you expose kids to the kind of work-based experiences, the kind of coursework that actually leads to work, because I think it is really important that kids know and understand what the difference is.
So are you guys measuring what kinds of jobs are available in this region,
correct.
and that's how you're making decisions about what meaningful means? Are there other pieces to meaningful?
Yeah, and so it really is how do we help students get the kind of experiences that are going to help them actually get a job that can lead to a livable wage career.
So you've painted a big picture, and you have got a lot of wildly important goals. What's your trajectory for the next 3 to 5 years of this strategy? Where will we see Colorado in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think the best compliment that I have received from a superintendent, I was at a convening at the beginning of this month, and a superintendent asked me, hey, did you write the strategic plan so that districts could just borrow it? And that was, I thought, the highest kind of compliment that we could get as a department, because the work that we're describing is not the work of just the Department of Education. We probably took longer than maybe some people felt comfortable in drafting our plan, but it was because I really wanted it to reflect the work in the field and the needs in the field. And to me, what that tells us is, this most recent year, our third graders we went up a little bit from where we were, about a point from where we started benchmarking, we have a long way to go to get to 60%. We have a long way to go to get to 100%. And at the department, we talk about our job is really three things. We serve, guide, and elevate. And so service really is, what's the service that we're providing to the field? But we also have guidance. And I say service and guidance should be in tension all the time. Because if all you did was serve, we could very easily help people break the law. If all we did was guide, we would be constantly wagging our fingers at people, and that our job as the State Department of Education is to constantly work on the tension between service and guidance. And then really, I think the unique role that a state agency plays is we get to see all over the state. And so the elevate part of our work is to take the examples of people who are getting outsized results for the kids who need it most, shine a spotlight on it, and try to learn and scale from those practices. And so really, in 5 years, what I hope that we're able to see is that we've made meaningful progress toward these goals, that we've done that through our service and our guidance, and that we're showcasing the districts that are doing the best work across the state.
Well, I'm going to end us there, and I also want to thank you for being with us and sharing your story, and also for all the work that you're doing in Colorado. Please join me in thanking Commissioner Cordova.